There's more going on in libraries than you may think. We help people turn their bright business ideas into reality. Friendly support, smart advice. For everyone, for free. At the British Library Business and IP Centre, in libraries nationwide.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Isabel Oswell, and I am the Director of Business Audiences at the British Library, which translates into business support services, both here in London and across our national network. And many of you may be thinking, why is this event happening, inspiring entrepreneurs at the British Library? And as the video says, there's more going on in your library than you think. So this particular event, which is part of our Inspiring Entrepreneurs series, is being run in conjunction with our digital storytelling exhibition, which is across the road in the main library, and also as part of our Business and IP Centre network service. In fact, this is our flagship, or one of our flagship events. I want to say welcome, obviously, to everyone in the room, everybody who's joining us online. I think there are about 120 or so people joining us online. And also to our colleagues, the audiences who are joining us from Leeds. Big shout out for Leeds. Anybody here from Leeds? No? There must be someone. Manchester. Anybody here from Manchester? Yay! And also from Warwickshire. Anybody here from Warwickshire? You're very London-centric, aren't you? But anyway, big welcome to you all, and big welcome to everybody out there who's joining us tonight. And who in this audience has actually used the Business and IP Centre? Very few of you. Well, I'm hoping to convert the rest of you, because we've just done a briefing, actually, for our speakers tonight, and they were saying, British Library Business IP Centre, never heard of it, apart from 3 who've actually used us, so who may talk about it later. Anyway, we set up the Business and IP Centre back in 2006, and we support people from all walks of life to set up and run successful businesses by giving them access to vital market intelligence, intellectual property expertise, one-on-one advice, and mentoring in a trusted and very accessible space. And for those of you who don't know, we are the Library of the Intellectual Property Office, so we know all about trademarks, copyright, patents, and design rights. So for those of you in the creative industries and the gaming sector, that's really key. And we also provide industry guides, and we have an industry guide that I think is going to be on our stand tonight, but also available online, which is called Toys, Games and Gaming Industry. So do take a look if you're either in the sector or planning to get into the sector. And access to this service is completely free. All you need is a reader pass, and that again is free. To access our databases, and we have over £5 million worth of market research, so Mintel reports, for example, and Cobra. And you can also attend our workshops and our programs, either in person or online, and those are completely, you don't need a reader pass for those, and most of them are free and or highly subsidised. And since 2012, we've been scaling up our service, and we are now in 21 locations or cities outside of London, hence Leeds, Manchester, Warwickshire joining us. Warwickshire isn't an official partner yet. And we've deployed a hub-and-spoke model to reach neighbouring towns in urban, rural, and coastal communities. And together we run a consistent service with a local twist. And for those of you who haven't used us, if you do use us, you're going to increase your chances of success by a factor of 2. Because I don't know if you know, but the 3rd year in a business's life is a crucial year. And nearly, or over 50%, in fact, fail after that crucial first year, whereas 90%, over 90% of the businesses who start with us are still trading after year 3. And that includes over the pandemic, which was a very challenging time for everyone. And we're particularly strong at supporting people who are underrepresented in business, that including women, who are about 65% of our audience, 33% from an ethnic minority background, and 13% with a disability. That's including people with neurodisabilities. But anyway, back to tonight's event, Gaming for Business. I have to say, as an oldie, I know very little about this sector, so I'm really looking forward to hearing the speakers. And I did read as well from one of our market research reports that the sector is worth over £7 billion per annum. So it's absolutely huge, and it's growing by 8% year on year. So there's loads of opportunities. And we have gathered some fabulous leading lights from the sector, and I'm delighted to say, and they're going to talk all about the trends and the opportunities. And I was speaking to King Jay earlier, and I can't believe the number of countries that he's travelled to recently. I'm really impressed. I think I want to join your gang. And I'm delighted to say, as I mentioned, 3 of our speakers have taken part in our Scale Up programme. And we have a Scale Up programme called Get Ready for Business Growth, which is open to anybody in the creative industries who's turning over £100,000 or more. It used to be London-focused, it's now national, or it's England and Scotland. So if you're planning to scale, please apply. You can find out about the programme online. So we're now going to hold a discussion, and after that there'll be a Q&A and a networking reception, which I hope that you will all join us for. And please, those of you, I mean, you're all obviously very technical, so please would you post about this event on social media using the hashtags BIPC and Inspiring Entrepreneurs. So now I am going to invite our moderator for this evening, Marie Fulston, who is a leading independent curator and creative director of exhibitions, installations, and experiences that specialise in video games, play, and digital culture. And in 2011, she co-founded the UK indie game collective, The Wild Rumpus, which organised, I'm not sure if it's still running, you can tell us, international events to showcase indie games to audiences across the world. Previously, she was the first curator of video games at the V&A, where she led the curation of the headline exhibition, Video Games, Design, Play, Disrupt. And across her career, she has worked alongside a host of international organisations and leading cultural institutions. The list is endless, but it includes Smithsonian, ACMI, PlayStation, the Design Museum, Netflix, Channel 4, and Nintendo. So who better to moderate tonight's event? Over to you, Marie.
Hello. Is my mic on? I'm going to stand up here whilst I do the introductions, because I think I'm supposed to be seated in this mastermind, Magnus Magnuson chair, which is just, I'm going to feel a little bit too intimidated to sit there initially. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming out on this blustery day to come and join us for this Inspiring Entrepreneurs event. And today, as we've mentioned, we're going to be focusing on gaming in business. And of course, not forgetting those of you, I don't know where the camera is, it's over there, joining us online, again from Manchester, Leeds, and my own home county, Warwickshire. And so, yeah, so we're here to talk about games. And I think sort of, as has been mentioned, sort of, it's kind of an area that we can sometimes think of as being a little bit siloed, or a little bit sort of a subject that belongs to someone else over there, or that it's a mysterious area where we're not entirely sure if we know enough to be in this place. But video games is not a niche hobby. It's not something that is small. It's in fact an incredibly significant industry. And here's some numbers to help sort of quantify that in 2021, the video games industry in the UK was valued at £7 billion alone. In the UK, there are around 2,200 businesses, and that was in around about 2018, so don't know how many more have obviously started since then. And around about 70% of those businesses have been founded since 2010. But video games is not just an industry. Video games is a creative medium. It's a practice. It is sort of a whole cultural ecosystem. And so even if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily think of yourself as someone who plays games, as a gamer, I'm really sure that video games has touched your life in some way throughout your life, whether that's because you're somebody who played games when you were a kid and you've grown out of it, but maybe you're someone who plays sort of games on your phone and you're not quite sure if that sort of counts, or maybe your kids are people who sort of play games. But also games is such a huge part of contemporary culture, sort of invading sort of TV, taking tools from games, bringing them into other mediums. And sort of I think it's one of the things when we can think about where games is at now is thinking through my own sort of role or job, and that is as a curator developing exhibitions. Now, as a curator of video games, that is not something that I think when I was growing up was a role that I really thought was available or possible, because we just don't think of video games necessarily as being part of the sort of cultural spaces that are normally present within sort of museums. And so I think sort of the work that I do and the sort of areas that I'm able to work within now shows the way that video games has grown and developed as a medium and the possibilities of the amount of opportunities that it is not just about being somebody who makes games or publishes games. It can also be that you're interested in reporting or streaming or playing or performing or presenting. And so there's a whole host of opportunities that exist around games. And I think that's what's really great about the panel that we have here this evening, is that there's a really rich and broad range of opportunities that I think are represented in the different work that everybody undertakes. And the fact that they're all panelists that come from different backgrounds, have different experiences, and have come into video games from a range of different places. So the format for this evening is I am going to invite our esteemed panel onto the stage very shortly, and then we'll be having a discussion. There will be time at the end of the discussion for you guys to ask questions, and that's not just for the people in the room, that is also going to be available for the people who are watching at home. And then, as has been mentioned, there will be a networking session sort of afterwards. And so, yeah, so enough from me introducing how great our panelists are. We should just shuffle on and find out and hear from them themselves. And so I would like to welcome our first panel member, Sarah Kennedy from Wowbagger Productions, to the stage. So Sarah Kennedy has worked as a writer, producer, and director for over 25 years, first in TV and science engagement, and more recently in comics and games. In 2011, she set up Wowbagger Productions to explore how collective working, art and storytelling can improve science and health outcomes for all. Sarah is currently writing and producing 2 comics and a digital escape room game exploring OCD and anxiety disorders. The game has been co-designed with young people for whom this is a lived experience, psychologists, historians, and sociologists. Thank you, Sarah. And our next person, I'm going to slightly change up the order that I've got it down here so we can get everybody seated in the right seat. So we're going to jump to you next, Rich. So if everybody could welcome Rich Metzen, co-founder of Semipus. So Rich is a co-founder of, and I did ask him multiple times before he came up on stage how to pronounce this, Semipus Games. That's right? Yep, good. Good enough. So Rich is co-founder of Semipus, one of Creative England's CE50 top 50 creative and innovative companies, and as a UK Games Fund Smart Studio Award winner. Rich began his career welding sculpture for renowned artists before working as a technical artist in post-production in VFX houses. Rich moved into games as a freelance technical artist and Unity developer, going from BBC Worldwide Games as an associate producer to co-founding Semipus, a unique and innovative video game studio specializing in prototyping and R&D services and developing its own original IP. And who is next? We have King J coming up next. If everybody could give me a warm welcome in welcoming King J, professional gamer and content creator. So Justin Nelson Stennett, known online as King J, is a professional fighting game player, content creator, and pro player in the esports world. He is known for being a top player for popular games Tekken and Street Fighter, teaching his audience both how to play and conducting reviews of new products. King J has been streaming for 7 years, initially alongside other jobs before pursuing streaming full-time. Since then, he's been the face of brand deals for companies such as Twitch, YouTube, Alienware, and Red Bull. He became one of the first fighting game streamers to become a Twitch ambassador and was part of a of the YouTube Black Voices Creator Class of 2021, a grant program dedicated to amplifying the voices of Black creators. Thank you, Jay. And next, who have we got? We have got Els, who is coming up and joining us next. If you could give me a warm welcome in welcoming Els the Witch to the stage. Els is a gaming expert, YouTuber, and presenter. A gamer from a young age, Els gained a large following and started uploading playthroughs of games onto YouTube. These would include favorites such as Final Fantasy VII, Zelda Ocarina of Time, GTA San Andreas, and The Sims. Els has a degree in computing and over 4 years' experience in the tech industry, and her expertise has led her to a career in sports and esports, music, and entertainment presenting. The last few years have seen her co-host the FIFA E-World Cup final at the O2 Arena. She's appeared on E4's Games Master and the host of the Velo Global's gaming series Discovery Mode. Els also hosts a weekly show on Kiss Fresh, as well as her own podcast, Citizen Game. Thank you, Els. And last, but by no means least, David Molyneux. If you could give me a warm welcome and welcome Dave Molyneux, Creative Director and Game Developer. David Molyneux is an engineer, writer, filmmaker, and game developer. He wrote the Seven Chambers mobile app game and has produced its development to date. He approaches game development as a writer seeking to create stories that can translate into game development documents. David has worked with game development companies such as Unity and Fortune Cookie. As an engineer, he has worked on industrial control systems, and that has helped him develop his understanding of the code and process behind games development. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our wonderful panel for this evening. And so thank you all so much for joining us. So we're going to kick off by letting people say in their own words a little bit about their own work and their projects, and sort of introducing themselves. And so first we'll start at the other end of the side of the room. Sarah Kenny, would you like to tell us a little bit about your work and your projects?
Sure. So I come from a slightly different background. I sort of started in science, working at the Environment Agency. Actually, before that, I worked on Palace Pier as an elf and used to get to game after that and play Virtua Fighter for hours and beat all the boys, which they hated that. So my gaming sort of career started quite young. But I went on to work for the BBC, Channel 4, Discovery, working on sort of documentaries and factual dramas where mostly destroying the world with super volcanoes, solar storms, various sort of programs like that. And then I left and went to work for the Wellcome Trust for a year as the broadcast manager. And when I was there, I was exploring the use of games and the use of drama in health and sort of what they can bring to that sphere. And it absolutely sort of fascinating work while I was there. And that's when I set up my company, where I sort of started to develop projects using comics, immersive experiences to start with, and sort of digital projects around sort of health and science and health. And I guess in a way, this digital game, I'm just going to show you a clip from, it came from sort of doing some real-world immersive experiences. I worked with Mink Et, who runs Oobleck Games, to develop a couple of immersive experiences around comic books. So we did one around The Wicked and the Divine, which is a brilliant comic which features sort of young characters, and we kind of had a sort of escape game experience where you'd walk in, you'd meet the characters, you'd have various quests, and then you'd have to try and escape this sort of space. And then the following year, we did one with the Walking Dead comic. And again, we sort of brought in sort of scientists into the space. They played different characters, and you'd have different quests, and you'd have to escape the room. And then the pandemic hit, and we're like, how do we do this? How do we kind of work with the audiences? And so we put in a little bit of funding for a digital game, trying to sort of bring the sort of same sort of experience. I guess what I'm going to describe is probably not the way to raise funding for a game. We started with a 20 grand pot from the Physiological Society. We got another pot from the Academy of Medical Sciences. Then we got another pot from Arts Council. And finally, we've just got a pot of money towards the beginning of the year from the UK Games Fund. The game I'm going to show a clip from, I think had about 80K to make it, so we were really, really lo-fi. I think if I'd known something about games, I wouldn't have done it, because it would be terrifying up against all these AAA games with the money they have of ever trying to create a game for 80 grand, but we did, and I think perhaps it was my naivety that led us to do that. And so I'm going to show you a clip from, it's a film that we have to submit to the UK Games Fund every month. It's like a little walkthrough. And so it's a work in progress. The first time we showed an audience, so it's quite terrifying. But in this game, the idea is that you go into this flat and there's a character called Hannah who lives in the flat, and you have to sort of find out a bit more about her in order to escape this sort of looping game. But within the game, you have to collect these comic pieces, and the comic is called She Could Fly. And the comic pieces sort of tell you a bit more about this character who experiences OCD. When you've got the comic pieces, you put them on a table, and it unlocks these documentaries. And it's the documentaries and the real-world people who live with OCD and psychologists who give you the clues to ultimately escaping that level. So I've kind of combined my loves, documentaries, comics, and games, into something that may or may not work. We will see. But this clip is a walkthrough. It's got a sort of the narrator's voice. So our narrator is a Let's Play Twitch narrator. So the narrator it's kind of like the voice you're pretending to play the game. So we've got it's a rough version of that. It's not the final voice. And you can hear my voice, and you can hear the way that I have to describe to the UK Games Fund what we've done, where we've got, and so. But bear in mind, it's a work in progress, and we're going to show you the clip now. Sarah Kenny here for the Due walkthrough. First up we have is the updated menu.
Thank you so much for joining us here to play this digital documentary escape game. I'm Christopher Cantwell, the writer of the comic She Could Fly, which inspired this game.
I'm Martin Morasso, and I'm a comic book artist. I received an email from Karen Berger asking if I was available to do a book with her, and it was like a really nice story, and the mental health issue was pretty important to me.
Hi everyone, I am Karen Berger. I am the editor of She Could Fly. Luna is a 15-year-old girl who, in many ways, I think an archetype for what it's like being a teenager, almost like an exaggerated version of what I think we all go through in our adolescence, that feelings of doubt and insecurity, low self-esteem, worrying about what other people think about ourselves, and worrying if we're going to make the right decision, and really just trying to figure out who the hell we are. The fact that Chris has suffered from OCD since he was a young child makes the story so much more authentic.
This is a very personal story for me. So good luck, go forth, see if you can escape this game, and you might see me again knocking about in there as well.
This is a fancy living room. What do you think? Oh, that chair looks comfy, doesn't it? But we don't have time to sit down. We've got things to do.
In this lovely chair of wisdom, we haven't yet got the narration here, but we will have all the hints in this section.
Oh, okay, you're back. Cool. Look, you don't need that chair. I'm the one here to help you. Let's carry on with the task at hand, shall we?
And you'll notice we're starting to populate the flat with more art. So we had a piece there from the artist of The Walking Dead, Charlie Adlard. We've got, other sort of quite well-known comic artists. Some of their artwork will be on the walls.
Nice, you found all the pieces. Maybe we should read the comic.
You'll also see now we've got controls for the documentaries like pause, fast forward, rewind, and you can play it at fast speed.
In so many different ways. I think the unifying theme.
So yeah, it's kind of the trickiest things I think is sort of segueing between documentary and the game. And I think when we do the marketing for it, it's sort of been quite clear that actually there are going to be lots of moments where you do sit back and you watch the films and you enjoy the films, and the games are, are very much, the films are very much part of that. So that's where we're at. We're hoping to launch hopefully later in the year, but I'm kind of not announcing a date yet until all the programming is finished and we're happily on our way. But it's also worth saying that the team is kind of we're quite a diverse team. So we've got like a female artist, a female art director, and Toya DeLazy is our composer, and we've tried to sort of make it not just look a bit different, but sound different as well with the music, etc.
Wonderful, thank you, Sarah. And on to King Jade next, if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
So I'm mainly a fighting game player, but I'm kind of trying to branch out into other games. So like either shooting games or just, I want to be more of a variety streamer because I feel like fighting games is quite niche. But then other games, there's like a lot more people playing them. So there's a bigger audience. I've been streaming for, I'd say, 7, 8 years on Twitch. Been creating content on YouTube for ages. Yeah, I've been creating, nah, you're good. I've been creating content on YouTube for ages, so like mainly guides for like Tekken, so just to help newer players come involved and even for them to start streaming and creating content as well. Yeah, that's it really. I've just been like trying to like travel and trying to get like more of a global audience because I feel like there's not much people in the UK that do fighting game content, so I've tried to like get like audiences from different countries. So like I've been like Philippines, Korea, Saudi Arabia, Las Vegas, those countries. I wanted to capture different audiences, and it seems to work with me quite well. So yeah, I'm off to the Philippines again on the 28th of September.
And you're going to take us all with you, right?
I don't know.
Virtually.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just my main content is YouTube for like just informative reaction videos on like new gaming content. Twitch, sometimes I do the reactions on there and gameplay. I'm trying to get into TikTok because I know that's where everyone's kind of watching stuff now, and I want to start doing like streaming on TikTok, but I still haven't I still need to do more research on it. And Instagram, I don't know, I feel like the algorithm's a bit strange on there, but yeah, just YouTube and Twitch currently.
Well, hopefully it'll be interesting to be able to get into that a little bit more later about different platforms and so on. And next, David, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. So we created a game a couple of years back called The Seven Chambers, which is a hidden object puzzle adventure, which was my first game. And I want to show a little film now, which is an aspirational film. So this film is taking us to our next level. It's kind of a film for investors, to show investors what we're trying to achieve and as with that progression. So if we could just play that film first, and then I'll go a little bit more into the detail. My name is David Molyneux, and I'm the founder of Three-Headed Eagle. What if we had a game that was perfect for augmented reality, that was full of adventure, divided between two worlds, that measures your reaction and incorporates it into gameplay? We already have the intellectual property of such a game. It's called The Seven Chambers, that tracks the conscious and subconscious worlds. We can open portals with our minds. We can see into other worlds, brought about by our imagination. The themes of the game use astrology, dimensions that have also been used within Chinese astrology. And so, what are we left with? A fascinating game that straddles the worlds and our internal worlds. And with that gameplay, we can connect to others all over the world and create gameplay that is personal and interpersonal and worldwide. So, what? Thank you. So, I mean, what does that mean? So the idea is to, you know, use the narrative of alchemy and astrology, but also with the game explore consciousness as well. And it's an area that sort of science is now moving into. And because of my background as an engineer in control systems and simulation, I was working on simulators for nuclear power stations and nuclear submarines. And obviously you don't allow an operator to, if that's the right word, to drive a submarine or to operate a nuclear reactor. What you do is you create a simulation through a computer. And so what happens is that the simulator measures the operator, and in a simulation of those industrial systems, it feeds it back into a control desk. And so what we want to do is to use that idea and measure the player through the gameplay, and also measure the player through the equipment on the phone. So that could be GPS, it could be the movement of the phone, and then create a kind of personalized gameplay. And then if you bring the two together, the simulation and the gameplay, what you are trying to effectively create is a mirror. And it's a subconscious. The player is still being entertained in the game, but the idea is to use consciousness to improve the mind. So I will say that this is obviously untried and untested, and I'm not a scientist, but we have linked up with a professor who runs an organization called Game Transfer Phenomenon. And this is the idea that, you know, behaviors can and possibly do change with the effects of gaming. And so that's our next ambition. That's where we want to go with this. And then hopefully through that idea and through those collaborations, we can build the next 7 Chambers. I wanted to do that with the first game, incidentally, but I couldn't simply because we didn't have the funding. When you do your first game, you know you're very limited with the funding. So we did what we did. And I'll just sort of share a few brief points as to how I got there in the first place, because I'm not a gamer per se, and I wrote a film script, and I took it to a dear friend who was in the film industry, and it was a fancy drama, and he says, you're never going to get this made. You might have written what you think is a good script, but even though you're never going to get that funded. And so I was chatting to another friend, she just said, well, turn it into a game. And I went, well, how do you do that? And so we found, it took us 2 years to get the financing, which is all private financing eventually. And then I gave them the script thinking, right, they can just turn that into a game from the script. Of course, they looked at that and said, we can't do anything with that. So I literally spent, coincidentally, about 6 months of my life in the British Library, in the reading rooms, writing a game design document and learning how to write a game design document, which was then given to a game development company, and they made the game. And so that was how it was born. But as I say, it was a completely chance event that I ended up being a game developer. I didn't set out to be a game developer. So there's chances for everybody. So.
And David, I first of all apologise for asking this next question, because I know you've definitely had it before, but just quickly, Peter Molyneux, any relation?
I've shook hands with Peter Molyneux.
Okay, don't relate.
But I'm not, but you know, it's great when you go to game conferences, because people start stalking you.
Yeah.
Because they see the name Molyneux until they take a closer look at your name badge, and then they see the first name's a little different.
Top marketing tip or networking tip is change your surname to that of a
of a famous
games developer, and everyone just kind of assumes.
Yeah, by that I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, he is an icon in the game development world. He's probably one of the earlier pioneers of game development. Yeah.
Thank you. And Rich, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what Xenopus is up to at the moment?
Sure. Well, my name is Rich Metzen. I've run a studio called Smeopus for 9 years now. Before that, I worked in visual effects, film and TV, and before that, I was a metal worker. So my start in the gaming industry started with welding up cattle fences in the field. And I always like to note that because I think it's important for most people coming into games to know that you can come from anywhere. I also didn't really know that people made games until I was in my 20s. And I think that's also a valuable piece of information because it's such an obscure, arcane medium that it's sometimes really hard to grasp that there are people using their hands and their intellect to make these things. In terms of why I set up my own studio and the sorts of things I wanted to explore, I've always been interested in subcultures, whether that's like punk for music or for me specifically, I came up through hacker culture, specifically being involved with the London hack space when it was founded originally around about 2010, 2011. And so in having done that, I wanted to explore specifically subjects that don't traditionally get explored in games, such as digital rights and privacy. This is now kind of more common parlance, but when we first started prototyping games around that stuff pre-Snowden, people would ask like, what's a data privacy? You know, kind of questions where it was like, it just wasn't a subject matter that people had any kind of vocabulary in. So we kind of explore those kinds of niches and subcultures. And the way that we do that is by making the majority of the games, if not possibly all of them, moddable by the communities, because I have multiple friends that I came up with who got in a lot more trouble than me through being involved in computers and the hacker scene. A good number of them were involved in Anonymous and Lulzsec, if anyone remembers those days. And they got in a lot of trouble. They rocked the world a little bit, and they have stories to tell. And I just felt like there was no way I could tell their stories from their deep element of the culture. And so I wanted to invite hackers to come and tell their stories in the games that we made. So that's really the focus. In order to sustain a studio that makes these weird and wonderful niche experiences, we've always done work for hire at the same time. So the last 9 years, we've focused primarily on making educational games. So I like to think that our kind of original IP tends to educate people about the weird and the wonderful. And then the stuff that we get paid that helps us fund that is more like teaching kids algebra or how to program or computer science. That probably sums it up, I think.
Yeah. No, it's great. And it is really great just to hear from such a variety of people coming in from different backgrounds and places. And I think that's something that will be really interesting to pick up on a little bit later as well. Is just sort of, we can talk about the projects that are sort of the glitzy front-facing stuff, but what else actually is coming in regards to revenue streams to make the work that you guys do possible. Els, I've got my fingers crossed that the third microphone that I think you've been given this evening is going to work. So would you like to introduce yourself?
I think it's me. When it gets to the third microphone, I think it turns out to be me. Hello, everyone. My name is Els. I'm also known as Els the Witch on YouTube and other platforms. I am predominantly a content creator on YouTube and a presenter as well. I started my YouTube journey at the end of 2018, so it'll be 5 years coming up at the end of this year. The reason was I have always been told most of my life, especially when I was younger, that I don't look like I should play games or I don't look like I should be into computing, and it kind of annoyed me. So for a while when I was younger, I sort of suppressed it. I didn't game for a long time, and then when I got into my adulthood, I started working and I was not enjoying it, working in an office. And I was like, what do I really enjoy doing? And it was always games. Since the age of 8, I used to watch my sister play games a lot, and I just fell in love with it, really. And I wanted to sort of squash that stereotype around what a gamer is and not be a role model. Like, I could never be a role model to someone, but be someone that especially younger females can look up to, and someone that is not typically what people would imagine a gamer to be. I know now there's so many gamers and the gaming industry is so massive, but back in the day, that wasn't the case. So I wanted to be someone that didn't look necessarily like a gamer and was a gamer, but was also into other things like sport and makeup and fashion and things like that. So that's how I started my YouTube journey. I previously, before that, went to university. My degree is in computing management and business from Manchester University, and I used to work at IBM for 3 years, so I was a project manager. And as much it was a really great job, and that was a great company, especially for supporting women in tech, I just knew that it wasn't for me to be in an office, and I knew that I had something else to give the world. I just didn't know what it was, and turns out that it ended up being video gaming and now presenting. So from being on camera and being on YouTube and just kind of talking on camera, I naturally fell into some presenting roles. So you mentioned earlier the FIFA E-World Cup. That was my first time presenting. It was at the O2 Arena, and it was on Sky Sports. There was quite a lot of people watching that, and I'd never been on stage before, and my manager just said, act like you know what you're doing. So I did, and I was backstage for about an hour just staring at a wall, practicing my 30 seconds that I had to say over and over again, and it went well. I didn't mess it up, and there was someone from the Premier League in the audience, and a few days later we got an email. They were starting a new show, and they wanted me to come and do a green screen for it, and it kind of just happened from there. So everything, that was probably about 3 years ago, so it's kind of like a trickle-on effect, I guess. But when I quit my job at IBM, because it was, I always call it the life plan. So when I was younger, my parents were like, okay, you go to school, you do your A-levels, you go to university, you get a 9 to 5. And that was the life plan, I always call it. And I wasn't the type of person to stray from what I'd been told, so I take things very matter of fact, like you should do this, you should do this. So I just went along with it. I got to 26 and I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. This isn't what I enjoy doing. So trying to explain to my parents when I live in London, which is a very expensive place to live, and I have to pay rent, that I'm going to quit my job and just do something online that they knew nothing about. I actually took my mum to the V&A, to the video game exhibition, to educate her on like what video games were, because she knew that we loved gaming, me and my sister, but she didn't really know the world of online gaming, especially my dad. It was only when I started doing football stuff that he really knew what I was doing. But yeah, it's a long journey, but it's paid off, and my advice would be to just take a risk in life.
I'm glad that exhibition has helped sort of as an educational thing, because I've heard it from other people before, of various friends who work in games of saying, I took them along, like my parents did this exhibition, so they could see like, look, it is a legitimate thing, look, there's other people doing it as well. But one of the things that I wanted to just, a really quick question just to ask everybody is that I'm really curious just to get an idea of the scale of sort of types of company, whether people are sort of freelance or sole traders, if you're an SME, like what sort of size businesses? Elle, maybe you can sort of start like.
Yeah, so as a content creator, I guess, I am lucky enough that my dad's an accountant, so he's always taught me a lot about business. My degree was in business anyway, so from that, when I quit my job, obviously I was just a full-time employee then. I quit my job, I set up a limited company because the corporation tax works out, well, it used to anyway, works out cheaper than being a sole trader. So I set up my own limited company, and I am an employee of my own company. So every month I pay myself a salary, and that pays my rent and things like that. But yeah, legitimately, I am a company, so my brand is me, but it is a fully fledged company as well.
It's just yourself in there?
Yeah, just me.
Great.
Yeah.
And David, what about yourself?
Yeah, so firstly, when I did it, I loved doing it. I love the whole process of creating a game, but it's not sustainable yet as a revenue stream. And so I still work as an engineer, as a consultant. But with the idea and the vision, the aspiration that eventually it will be enough of a revenue stream to sustain me to do it full time. But I mean, I think I had to be practical and realistic. Yeah, it's and I think I learned a lot through. I was on the British Library schemes, I was on the Innovative for Growth scheme. You learn a lot through that process, and I think that I became quite realistic about how long it might take to build up a company.
Yeah, and so are you a limited company at the moment?
Yes, it's a limited company.
Okay.
Yeah. No, well, in terms of the development of the first game, that was done through investment, and it was done through a third party because I just created the game and the game design document. And similarly, in future, I think what will become as a company is we will be the sort of source of creation. But I think, and it actually is following a model I've learned through engineering anyway, is to outsource a lot of the actual, the development of it and take a bit of the risk away.
That's interesting as well that sort of, obviously, Rich, you mentioned as well about sort of having to balance different sources of revenue. And I know sort of, King Jay, that you mentioned as well, sort of, or at least it was in your bio, that the first 7 years, sort of in those early years, that you were balancing out with other work. So how about you? Like, is it just yourself? And
It's
like,
just
how
myself,
long?
limited
And
company.
are you sort of working, are you able now sort of to be 100% at that limited company, or are you?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. So yeah, like it's not. I don't have like a dad that does an accounting like you, but like I have some. I wish I did. But yeah, no. There's a accountant agent that is accountant agency that do all my paperwork and stuff. I'm not.
We don't have to get into it. We
Yeah,
don't
I'm
need
not
to
trying
do
to
the
do all that
paperwork.
stuff.
I'm just curious to know about
Yeah.
the scales of different things and like, are people, because I think it's worth being sort of honest, like, okay, in the first few years of starting a business, are you going to be sort of able to 100% sort of be sustainable from that revenue, or do you have to balance it out? And so, Rich and Sarah, what about yourselves? Like, what size companies are you, and where are you?
I run a 9-person studio built of largely developers, programmers, a couple of artists, and a producer. And that kind of floats up and down. So we have sound designers and freelance character artists and animators and voice actors, motion capture directors that float in and out. So like our core is 9 people, but at times production kind of sometimes ramps up to having 15 or so, all in kind of cahoots at the same time. And that also lines up with trying to run a couple of projects at the same time to de-risk. So we rely on client revenue. We then fill the gaps between client jobs by developing our own IP, and we also use things like the UK Games Fund and other grants and sort of arts-based programs to help fund the development of our own IP. But generally speaking, I've gotten to the point where we felt like we were struggling along as a smaller studio, sort of 4 or 5 people, and it was always really hard because you'd have this one project ends and then scrambling around for the next one because your capacity wasn't big enough to manage things. And so since we've moved into being more 9 or 10 people, it's been a lot easier to have things overlap. So that's how we've created our sustainability, and I feel like we probably need to kind of grow a little more in order to continue on.
Yeah, so I'm a limited company. I've been a limited company since 2011, and I hire freelancers, anything from sort of 5 to 50 on bigger projects. I think what's happened for me recently is that I've relied too much on grant funding. And I think since the pandemic, a lot of grant funding is obviously now going to more like looking after people and feeding them, and sort of, you know, a lot of grant funders are funding towards the Global South, which is absolutely right. And so I've just taken on a part-time job working at the Environment Agency as a senior engagement advisor. Interesting, who are working with Minecraft at the moment, so I'm going to be talking to them about their work with Minecraft. But I've had to, as this game has taken sort of a couple of years to develop, and as the money's run out, I've actually, for the first time, had to go back to PAYE. So I would say, don't just rely on one source of funding if you're doing, like, try and diversify. And I kind of wish I'd found, like, so I would do contract work and stuff, but actually sort of revenue from selling games and revenue from selling merch or something. I feel like we haven't done that. And since grant funding has, you know, it's a lot harder to get now, that's been slightly problematic. I'm okay about it, because I think at the end of the day, you've got to make money where you make your money, right? So there's no shame in having to do different types of sort of revenue streams or portfolio. So, but I would say a good bit of advice is looking at where you can monetize things beyond just grant funding. So.
And I think sort of one of the things that's sort of come across from some of the discussions is just sort of how much people are sort of working in really emerging sort of or newish areas. I mean, I say that sort of contextually, sort of that obviously sort of streaming and presenting has been around for a while, but compared to a lot of more traditional industries, that's still sort of quite new. And as much as it must be really exciting and interesting to sort of feel like you're stepping into a new area, I can imagine that's also really daunting. Sort of thinking about, okay, I'm working in an area that is yet to sort of really sort of define its business models. And so I think especially sort of Owls and King Jay, like yourselves, sort of working in sort of relatively sort of emerging areas, I'd be really interested to hear about sort of how do you learn to trust yourself and your instincts in terms of working in those spaces? And is there any sort of advice that you have for people who are perhaps thinking of working in areas that are sort of new or sort of new or emerging?
you want to go first? Or?
You go first, I'll go.
I was going to jump in at the end of the last bit and just kind of give some reality, I think, to
do that as well. That's always good.
content creation and the online world, because I think people see creators online and assume that that is their full-time job. A lot of the time, it's actually not. I think we're in a lucky position where we've been working at it for a good amount of time and we can sustain that. But especially at the beginning, it's not feasible to not work alongside of that. It takes a while to build up a profile and start learning just how the industry works, because as you said, it is very new. We're still kind of finding our feet. There is swings and roundabouts in terms of like, back in the pandemic, gaming was a very lucrative industry. I even feel guilty saying it, but like lockdown went very well as a content creator who does gaming, because everyone was at home video gaming. So all of the brands replaced their traditional marketing budget and just plugged it into content creators. So that for that time, it was great. But then I think we just need to learn to think more long term, because we don't know what it's going to be like in 5, 10, 15 years time. And it's still something that everyone is learning. But I think it's just the reality is not everyone is doing this full time. Most people do have a job alongside of it to help fund what they do online. And it's not all glitz and glamour, and it is a lot of hard work. But yeah, I think it's just still finding its feet, and it's important. I just try and remind myself all the time that it's not a long-term thing, and you just have to try and think that not everything lasts forever, and it's okay to take different paths. If you try and do something like what we do, content creation, and it doesn't work out, you can just go back to doing a traditional job, which I think is great as well. Like I learned so much skills from doing my 9 to 5, and I will never regret doing that at all.
I think as a content creator, like you're saying, like I think you always have to be on the ball, because things always change. Social media always change. You know, that you could be making money off of one platform, and then they change, I don't know, the algorithm, or they might change the way how certain things, how you upload things, and then, you know, the way how you monetize off of that might not be the same after a while. Then you have to look at different platforms. So I'd say definitely don't put all your eggs in one basket. See what's around, see how else you can kind of monetize in the gaming space, and just take it from there. I'm never ever complacent on just one thing. So, yeah.
That's a really good point as well about the sort of upheavals and challenges that people face. And obviously sort of one of the more recent stories in video games is sort of the charges and payments with Unity. And for people who aren't familiar, Unity is a sort of, essentially it's a tool with which a lot of people can create video games. And over the past week, they announced a slightly different sort of funding structure, which has sent a lot of developers into a bit of a panic about the financial realities of using that tool. But equally, sort of, Els, you yourself sort of talking about, okay, there was, on the other side, there's this sort of opportunity that came about through the pandemic, but then hang on a minute, what happens at the end when money isn't sort of in those spaces? And I think one of the things I was really keen to ask the panel is, and I don't know who perhaps has any sort of specific examples they want to speak up about, is the specific challenges that you have had to face with things sort of either rapidly changing or the ground sort of moving in different ways. And so, okay, we're going to go to you because you've got your hand up first. Like, yeah, and equally sort of when we're thinking about challenges, like, what did you learn from those as well? And like, were there opportunities in those spaces? But yeah, King Jay, you had your hand up to talk to that.
All right, cool. So before Twitter became X, before Twitter became X, I was making a lot of revenue from monetizing videos, and that wasn't rolled out to everyone. When it changed over to the X, now it just changed everything, because monetization is not the same anymore. And it's like, I wouldn't say I was relying on it, because I've always been like, this can't last forever, but it's really nice at the time. Trust me, it was really nice. But like, yeah, like after it turned to X, I was like, oh yeah, this is the reason why you cannot rely on things, because like, imagine now if I forgot about, you know, YouTube revenue, Twitch, I don't know, Patreon, whatever else you have, then I would have been done. Like, company would have been done. I wouldn't be making that much money. But because I've kind of like, I know things are changing, it's rapidly changing, like I was okay. Everything was fine. So yeah, you just have to just, like, as much as things might be nice at that time and you might be like, oh, this is really good for now, you always, well, I don't know, for content creation for me, I always have to be on top of my game and be like, all right, this is nice, but we need to know what else is going on around, you know what I mean? So I'm always researching and kind of like looking at other channels, asking people how they're finding things, you know, and just trying to catch up with people as well. So, yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
No, well, I've got a quick example on that one. I mean, we were partway through the development of the Seven Chambers, which is a hidden object puzzle adventure game. And that world, that casual game world, suddenly switched from to free to play in the middle of it. And we were looking to sell the whole game. And so we had to look at how we can do half free to play, half play. So what we did, we switched the model, the business model, so that a person could, there was 30 scenes in the game, you could play 7 scenes, and if you liked it, you'd pay and you'd play the rest of the game. But that really swept through from nowhere, the free to play model. Yeah, so that was one place where we had to switch very quickly.
I was just going to build off what King Jay was saying there about the artist formerly known as Twitter. I think that's something that's actually going to affect all of the games industry, especially developers, but content creators on an ongoing basis, because we're seeing a fragmentation and a balkanization of the places you reach your audiences. So we've been going through a relatively quiet stage. We used to have a fairly kind of noisy and regular social profile, and we quietened down while we got our heads down and focused on client work for a period. And just as I was hoping to start building that stuff up, it feels like the ground has sort of moved beneath us. So, you know, they used to say in social media, do 2 platforms and do them well. Right. It's not possible to do that anymore. You can't reach the audiences that you used to reach. I'm lucky enough that I've always been a bit old school and I've collected email addresses and run newsletters. So people are still on their emails and I have access through that, and you have your most dedicated fans that way. I think we'll kind of have to roll back to kind of knowing your audience directly. And that's a better thing, but it means at a smaller scale and a more intimate scale. But it's a very strange shifting place that is constantly kind of right now, constantly changing. And an example I was going to give, and I think he won't mind me kind of quoting him, it's a peer of mine and Marie's actually, David Hayward, who runs, he runs one of the UK's kind of longest standing shows in the Left Field collection at some major events like EGX and Rezzed. That show's always been oversubscribed for indie developers kind of coming and wanting to get their game out there and whatever else. And he said that he used to be able to kind of get hundreds, I think he said sort of between 250, 300 applications to show at a show where there were, I think, between 10 and 15 stands. And this time round, since everything switched to a different named platform, he was saying he really struggled to get 100 submissions. And that's not because less people want to show their games. There are more people than ever wanting to show their games. It's because the platforms that we have learnt to rely on are owned by people who will shift them and make your business model change without you knowing. So it's important to own your audience. I suppose that's kind of one of the things that comes from hacker culture is roll your own infra. And I think that will be how game developers and maybe content creators have to go. They have to find ways to capture their audience more directly.
I was going to ask what roll your own infra means, but I don't know if we've got long enough to get into that.
Roll your own infrastructure.
Infrastructure, there we go. Yeah. And Sarah, did you have any examples that you wanted to bring up? Or?
I think a lot of you said it all, and I sort of spoke about trying to sort of diversify and stuff. But I think also there's something about sort of working collectively with other like-minded people. Yeah. Like, so I met Rich on the British Library Create Growth Scheme, which has been absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I had no idea the British Library Business Centre existed, and I feel like I wish I knew about it 10 years ago, but it is amazing. And I think sort of when you put yourself on schemes and kind of educate yourself, you meet other like-minded people. And I think we need to get better as businesses at supporting each other and forming collectives and thinking about how we can kind of promote each other. And I feel like the more that you do that, the more that, you know, as sort of UK sort of games industry people, we kind of rise together. So I think that I feel like these sort of networks, I'm not very good, I'm a terrible networker. I just sit in the corner and drink my beer, right? But I need to get better at like reaching out to people and having these conversations and doing that. And I feel like the more we do that, the more we can reach this sort of global audience, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice segue into something that I was really keen to talk about is thinking about sort of areas of support. Because as you say, when we go through these big periods of shift and change and upheaval, like what sort of communities are there as well to provide sort of support, or what other places can we look towards? And I think sort of here, obviously we've heard sort of from people talking about the support they've received through the British Library. I know that Rich and Sarah, you are both people who have received funding from the UK Games Fund, but also there's potentially sort of different informal ways of receiving support through different networks. And so I just wondered, like for the panel, if anybody really has sort of examples of any sort of areas or networks of support that have been really sort of critical to them in supporting them in their work, be that sort of through formal channels or be that through sort of perhaps informal mentorships or like small sort of communities. Like what are places that people might look towards to help them sort of feel not alone in going through these big sort of moments of sort of upheaval and change?
Well, I can touch on one for me. I first got into video games having worked in film and TV, as I sort of mentioned at the beginning. And it happened because actually Ricky Haggett, who is a prominent indie who's made some wonderful games and was part of the Wild Rumpus.
Yes,
was. Which is a wonderful set of events. But Ricky kind of invited me to my very first game jam. I was at a Christmas party for an advertising agency that we both worked at. And some colleagues knew that I was kind of tinkering around, and they got me to speak to Ricky, and Ricky was like, hey, come to the game jam on the weekend. I was like, what's a game jam? And so, you know, I'd been kind of writing technical tools for VFX Pipeline, so I knew a little bit of Python, and I'd sort of been self-taught in code for a little while. And kind of being introduced into that game jam scene helped me. And from there, the kind of London indie scene has always been very kind of homegrown. So we used to go to the Stoke Newington loading bar, and we were given the keys to this pub, which is a gaming pub, and we were allowed to just go there anytime we wanted and just work there because the owners loved game developers and indies. And so I think you can find these nice little informal...
to give you their keys.
A pub to give you their keys. I mean, the kind of, the premise was that you kind of worked for the day there and you made sure that you stopped and had a beer afterwards to say thanks. It worked really well. And so, like, the London scene's been great like that. And it ended up kind of fragmenting as it got bigger, which actually has made it harder to manage. Its growth has made it kind of more sporadic or satellite. But I think, you know, you can find these, even for something so digital, you can find these real life, in-person communities in these weird and wonderful ways, and that certainly helped me.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, for me, it's surround yourself with mentors and advisors. Some in the audience who came along to see this today, but you can't beat that. You know, I think you need to have, you know, people who you trust, people around you, because, you know, we might have ideas, but the application of those ideas, you just need a wealth of experience around you.
How did you find your mentors?
Different. Well, one mentor came from the British Library, and I don't mind. I'm sure she won't mind me telling this story. The other mentor came by chance because a friend of mine went to fit a kitchen at her house and found out what she did and then told me. And I thought that they'd arranged for me to contact, direct message. So I direct messaged her and she said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I've been told, you know, you have this type of experience." "Yes, but who are you?" And then but it actually turned out really well, and we've become, she's helped me a lot and become friends in the meantime as well. So I think it can come, as long as you're open-minded and you're open to receive good advice, good information, that's the way to do it, really.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't come from any one place.
Yeah. And like, and King Jay, obviously I know that you were part of, as we read in your bio, like the YouTube Black Voices program. How was that as sort of like a sort of program of support as well?
Yeah, so that program was very, very interesting for me because like it was like a whole year of having meetings with like, you know, people that are like either very big content creators or they've got their own businesses, black owned and stuff. And it's like we was learning to do things like learning how to cook certain things for food, which was really interesting. We're all on that Google Meet, just hanging out together. And then there's other content creators that either similar size or a lot bigger. We're just all just having fun. It's great that I got selected by that, but I wish there is more things for everyone where you can just be like, all right, as a content creator, if we want this fund or if we want this, then we can access them. I don't really know. Most of the time I'm always being, like, I'll get selected, but I don't actually go out there and be like, oh, I know this fund, that fund company, so yeah.
Can I ask a question? Sort of taking Marie's role. Like, does that mean that it sort of feels like it's not formalised in the same way yet because it's such a young industry?
I don't even think it's that it's such a young industry. I just think it's still very new. People don't know what to do with gaming as such. Like, you know, we create content, but again, like there is no like manual, there's no structure in how to be a gamer. Do you know what I mean? Like, Els, you do different things to me, but we both play games. There's no structure to it. It's just somehow, you know, I'm doing well in it, you're doing well in it, someone else out there is doing well in it. But they have their own way of kind of pushing themselves out there, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like obviously it's not of much use for the panel, but obviously sort of I've heard about sort of networks of support like Black Girl Gamers as a community that has really sort of, and that has done phenomenally well in terms of sort of really platforming itself and sort of being that sort of support network and running events. And equally sort of we've mentioned things, more formalised things like the UK Games Fund, and there is obviously places like Yuki. I don't know how much use it is just sort of listing things out on stage, and I know Barclays as well have a lot of support as well, so I know that they are places to sort of look towards, but that's really interesting. I'm curious to see sort of how that stuff's going to develop in terms of sort of support networks, because you are, again, sort of going back to the thing that I said at the beginning, like it's exciting to be at the vanguard of something and to be doing something new, but you are also often living with that sort of anxiety of like feeling as though you're making it up as you go along.
Every day it feels like that.
And I was like, I admit I did some research and read your Glamour article before the event, and I know that you credited as well, sort of like as a mentor, as somebody that was really important to you, sort of in those early stages. Was that sort of a formal thing, or sort of?
That was so informal. So he's now one of my managers, actually, Austin. We were friends and we were meaning to go into business together. We were going to make a water company or something. This is when I was still working at IBM, and I told him I'd quit my job. I was just like, I've quit my job. And he said as a joke, oh, you should let me manage you. And I was like, what for? Like, I don't know what I want to do. He's like, no, come in to the office. He was working at Spotify at the time. So I went in literally the next day. We had a meeting. And from then, we've been working together. We've never signed a piece of paper. And I think I have been so lucky because I've heard so many stories about, you know, people trying to find the right management team and just people that they trust around them. And I've got so lucky with him. So he started off as a mentor and now has progressed and he's part of the management team now. But no, he was so important because I am quite a negative person, naturally. I'm quite negative about myself. And I wasn't not self-confident, but I never put myself first. So I would always help everyone around me. And I never imagined that I would be a presenter or in front of a camera because I always envisioned myself as the person that was behind the scenes helping everyone else. And what Austin said to me was like, if you put as much effort into yourself as you did to helping other people, who knows where you could go. And that is the kind of confidence I need. So he's very overly positive and I'm a bit negative. So we kind of balance each other out and it works. And that's sort of the confidence I need. So I reckon just having a small circle of people that you really trust and can rely on is so important. And in our industry, I would say you just feel like you're an individual. You're there by yourself and it's not every person for themselves because we've met so many good people. You mentioned Black Girl Gamers, Jayanne, Steph from Nay Saga. There is so many people in this industry that we can rely on and share ideas and things like that. So it's just important to you know, if you have an idea, you can talk to one of your fellow creators and speak to them about new platforms. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is just you. So sometimes if you're up at 2 a.m. in the morning wondering about, oh God, have I made the right decision? You're not alone, because I think we all do the same thing.
Yeah, I've been up late. That's why as soon as you said, you're laughing. That's why as soon as you said 2 a.m., I've been up at like 5 a.m., like doing a long stream and stuff. No, not even that. Like sometimes I do long streams, but if there's a new game, I'm so excited that I just don't want to come off. So I'll be streaming until like late, until when I'm really tired. So yeah, it gets like that sometimes.
I relate to all of this as well, like as somebody who, like even the line of work that I'm in, I just sort of sometimes think, have those moments of just like, what on earth have I done? Like, I'm just sort of like, I've created this quite chaotic profession that like, but there is like these little sort of pockets and networks that you can find. And what I really like from a lot of the examples that you guys have given of support is how much it's come from quite unexpected places, like that you're saying, like you get keys to local pub to just sort of go co-working, or it's somebody that you found sort of incidentally, or you've maybe WhatsApp messaged somebody who's coming to, were they coming to fit your kitchen?
No, it was...
But anyway, that it can come from sort of unexpected places as well as quite formal places. Now, I'm keeping an eye on this rather gigantic clock that we've got in front of me. So I've just got one short question that I want to, I've not got through all the ones that I wanted to, but there's one that I do want to ask the panel. After I've asked this question and everyone can give like a quick short answer-ish to it, then we're going to open up questions to the audience. For the people who are watching online, you should also have the ability to ask questions through a portal. I am going to step up there and I'll be able to hopefully field and see the questions that you guys are submitting online. And so the last question that I want to ask as the moderator about, or from yourselves, and if you could give sort of relatively sort of like concise-ish answers, is it if you could go back in time and give yourself maybe sort of X number of years ago as you were starting out on this path, one piece of advice or some sort of piece of sort of inspirational motivation, what would that be? Who wants to go first? Not Els, because she said, oh God. Sarah, I'm gonna target you. Like, is there anything looking back that you're like, actually, look, this is something you can get through, or like,
Specifically for games, you mean?
yeah, well, just yeah, in games, in the company that you're in at the moment, is there anything that you look back that you could think that you would like to sort of tell yourself? Or
I mean, it's quite hard because we're about to release the first game that we've made, but I guess it's. I think you worry a lot about what your audience will think and whether they'll like the game and all that sort of stuff, and I think you just have to have confidence in the thing that you're creating and not try and make it double guess the audience and not try to make it something, I guess, that you think other people think you should be doing, sort of trust your instincts a bit with that. Yeah, I think probably trust your instincts.
Trust your gut, that's good.
I think I would have probably told myself to not be scared of growing the company earlier on. It's taken me until the last sort of 18 months to double up from that kind of 3 or 4 people to, well, more than double, to 9 or 10. And I could have done it a lot earlier, and I could have run a couple of projects in parallel that would have supported each other in that kind of way that we've managed to find a cadence with sooner. I think it's really kind of fear of failure gets in the way a lot of the time. So, you can be brave and you can grow a company, and actually props to the British Library, because the Business and IP Centre has been massive in helping me kind of really commit to that. Like, once you tell someone, my aim is to grow my company to X by Z, you've kind of said it out loud, and then you have to do it.
I would have told myself to start content creation sooner, but I was shy in front of the camera. Like, obviously you have to set the camera up, and then I didn't know where to look. Sometimes I'm looking and I'm like looking there. But like my friend was telling me, like, there's like a white tape hanging just underneath the lens. And I just kept on looking at that when I was talking. And then it kept on helping me get better at looking in front of the camera. But I was a mess. Like, you just see my eyes going everywhere.
But it's good to be remembered that, like, nobody's perfect when you start out. Like, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to be shy, but just stick a piece of paper under it.
My first YouTube video, makes me cringe so much when I look back. I actually recorded 4 videos before I even put one live because I was so bad. And I was just, you know when you have an out-of-body experience and you're like, if I was a fly on the wall right now, honestly, it's not great. My advice would be try not to please everyone. You literally cannot please everyone, and I am a people pleaser. So I try and be perfect all the time. And one thing I have learned from doing stuff on social media, especially, is that you can never please anyone, and that you deserve to be in the rooms that you are in, because people will make you feel like you're not, but you have something to give, and you do deserve to be there. So that is my advice.
Excellent advice. David?
Yeah, mine is learn how to speak to investors and funders. I talk about cringeworthy moments. I used to have no idea what you did. I thought I'll just type the idea out on a piece of A4, and I used to go into galleries on Bond Street with this idea, thinking that, well, they must have access to funding, and I can't believe I did it now. But I think that was the learning process in how to eventually put an investor perspectives and package together. But yeah, I did go through a very nerve-wracking experience
But
to get there.
again, it's this idea of like, look, you will try some things and they won't all work out. But from those things, you can learn and get experiences that get you to where you are. And so thank you, everybody, for giving us your past self advice. And so now I'd like to open up questions to the floor. Who has got, there should be a mic that is moving around. Who am I looking for there? Okay, so if anybody's got a question, if you could raise your hand. We've got this guy down here in a green shirt.
Hello, hi. So my name is Omar. I've got my own startup studio that we're hoping to release a game in the next month or so. And I guess my question is, what would be your advice? Oh, sorry. Well, my question is mostly, I guess, to Els and King J. You might be best at answering this, but what would be your advice on growing a audience? Just kind of getting yourself out there on the social media scene. That's kind of where we're struggling at the moment.
Do you mean as a business or as an individual?
Both. And yeah, I guess.
For me, my biggest pieces of advice is be consistent. One thing I did when I first started YouTube was set a upload schedule. So I was uploading twice a week, just so that your audience know when you're going to have new videos. Now it is non-existent, but in the earlier stages, definitely very important. And secondly, my biggest piece of advice was to lean on people that you know, maybe friends. They don't even need to be in the industry if they're happy to be on camera, or people that you know in the industry, and collaborate with them. Because my favorite videos are when I have someone else with me and you can bounce off of them, because as much as it's great, well, for me anyway, it was great for me to be on my own playing the games. People really liked my personality more when there was someone else there. So lean on people in your network as well.
I would say collaboration is a big key for just, you're saying that it's your game that you want to play on, you just want to stream it, or?
So we're developing our own games. Yeah. So we want to both build ourselves up as a company, and especially the game that we're currently working on, and kind of show that on our platform. We have Twitch and Instagram, but I don't know, we've been doing it for a couple of years. We tried to do online workshops, for example, like we used to do face-to-face, getting into the game industry, stuff, building your first project management, that kind of stuff. But when we transitioned, because of COVID, we had to kind of go online. But it was a complete kind of dark area for us of just we found in face-to-face it was easy, but online it was very difficult to kind of get that momentum going. We just didn't really know where to start, I guess.
I would say collaborative, content creators. There's so many content creators now that would probably want to, play your game. There was also an event that happened last weekend, WASD, and it has a lot of indie games. Reach out to them, reach out to other people that support indie games as well, and creators and events. Get it out there.
Thank you.
No worries.
Can I add something to that we found really, really useful was that when we've sort of launched projects, we work with a PR person. We've got a person in LA who's brilliant. He works with the Pop Cultural Press, and we got placed in something like 73 different articles, from Hollywood Reporter to National Geographic to all different places. And then what you find then is you get an organic sort of spread of your work. And I think there's something about somebody else saying, this is really good, rather than you saying, this is really good. So if you can identify journalists in all sorts of different pop cultural spaces, there's so much, brilliant podcasts, online spaces now, and make a list and then sort of send them personal, if you've got the time, but send them sort of personal emails about your work. I do find that, that sort of people who've already got audiences and working with them, and over the years you build up a relationship with these journalists, and they will come back and they will feature your work again. And so that, and newsletters, your own newsletters.
Sorry, just to kind of build on what you just said, would you advise on how would you reach out in wording wise, or a journalist online, just sending that first email?
It's really difficult because we've worked with press people who have relationships with them already. So, I mean, we have press releases, so we will create a press release and we will sort of circulate that. But I think sort of, sending press releases, but it is tricky, but I would just email them, and you can then send a follow-up email, and if you don't get anything back, sort of move on. Or find somebody who is already plugged in, and it might be that you can just buy a day of their time and they will target certain people for you. But there are sort of specialist games press people around that will help you with that work as well.
I could add to that, because actually one of the ways that Sarah, Kenny and I actually started sort of collaborating and getting to know each other best was she cottoned on to the fact that I had a games press infiltration strategy, and she asked me to take her through it. So what you can do is you can basically list out the genre that the games that you make fit into, and then build a spreadsheet of every single journalist that's ever covered similar types of games within your genre. And then what you want to do is look through the Metacritic scores that they've given to it, and anyone who's rated a game like yours highly is more likely to like your game. So you can target them basically in order of the likelihood that they will like what you like, because they have already reviewed similar things highly. And it's a bit of manual work. There are ways that you can kind of cheat and leverage ChatGPT and other things like that nowadays. But there's lots of ways like that. And I think fundamentally, whether you build a spreadsheet or not, what it comes down to is there are journalists out there who are like-minded and like the things you like, and reaching out to them first and foremost is important. So like we've had, because we make games about hacker culture and hackers, we had a press story where I knew a tech journalist who was interested in getting a story out of a friend of mine who was being extradited to the United States at the time. And so we did this massive profile piece on Sky News, actually more about Lowry's case. This is Lowry Love, who some people might be aware of. More about Lowry's case, but the fact that he was featuring as a video game character and why it was important for him to be able to describe his situation through video games, things along those lines. And so you can find these weird angles where a journalist, you can just pique their interest. So just look for things like that. There'll be something in your game that matches the things that other people write about that you can leverage.
Yeah, and some really good advice there in terms of doing your research and knowing who you're pitching to. And I think that there are a lot of places as well for sort of resources online that, again, sort of hubs like looking at sort of Yuki, looking towards Barclays as well with the resources they have on their website. But in terms of questions, so who else has got a question? I'm going to instigate a new rule, which is if you could keep it to one question. So no, I'm afraid you got your second question in, good for you. And also if it's directed to a specific person on the panel, then just let us know who that is. And also, again, if anybody is watching online and wants to submit a question, then please do pop that in. I've got the iPad here so I can read those out if any come through. But yes, who else? Who's next? We've got some people just up behind you, just there, the back.
Okay, so my question is directed towards Jay and Els. So first of all, nice to see you guys again. And to follow up on what you said earlier, how do you guys, like, when you started out, how do you balance, your daily life? So, so you had a job earlier, right? Like IBM you worked at. How did you balance that and content creation?
Is it broken again? Okay, it's back. We are back. When I started YouTube, I'd quit IBM, so I didn't have to balance it. But when I was working at IBM, I was actually writing a blog and I did a radio show at the same time. So the way I balanced it was just I would work all day, maybe fit in the gym somewhere, and then I would go home and do the work in the evening and on the weekends. So it's kind of like two jobs in a way and not really much social time. But it's kind of one of those things that you just have to do whilst you look at the long-term plan of like, one day I'll be able to make this a full-time career when I'm gonna, where I'll have more time to have a social life and things like that. But yeah, it was just a time of just constant working.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have no structure, so I can't lie and say I did. I had a full-time job, so I was a tenant liaison officer. So it's like basically being the middleman between speaking to the tenants and speaking to the council. So, if they need to get certain things changed, then I'd have to speak to the council and stuff like that. The job was nice. It was like 7 a.m. start, and then I'd finish at 4 p.m., 5 p.m., go home. And then, I would stream, sometimes I'll fit gym in, sometimes I wouldn't. I think it was just, I was nervous at the time because I just didn't know if gaming was going to pay off. There was no one around that time that was streaming on Twitch. Twitch was Justin TV before. And again, there wasn't really much fighting game content creators. I just thought it was something I can just do as a hobby. Might go to some tournaments and see how I do, and that was it. But then I was just like, one of the days I was just like, right, you know what, maybe I'll just, quit my job and maybe it'll work. I was talking to my dad about it and he's like, nah, that doesn't pay the bills. It's, normal 9 to 5 and stick at that. But I just didn't listen to him and I just rebelled and just, I'm here now, innit? So yes, it worked out.
We've got one question in from the audience, and hopefully this is a quick sort of raise your hand one, which is this. We've obviously asked you guys about people who have mentored you, but the question from the audience is, would you also be up for mentoring other people? So, there we go. So the answer to the person online who asked that, the answer is yes. Also, one thing that I would add to that is also that there is a really good networking scheme called Limit Break, which is mentorship, which is, I think, primarily open to women or marginalised genders, which if you're interested in looking for mentorship or being paired up, then that's something that's really worth sort of looking up and finding out more about. And yes, so I'll go back to the room. There was a guy with the white hair right at the very far end down here, if we could get the mic down there. And apologies, I've not been looking over here if there's been any questions. There we go, I'll come over to you.
Hi, I'm the guy with the grey hair, which is good. My name is Mike Southern. I'm an entrepreneur and a business mentor, but I work a lot with larger organizations that are looking for that kind of creative spark to be entrepreneurial in their traditional businesses. And the concept which comes up a lot is and especially from the younger members of staff, is why don't we gamify what we do? So the interactions we have with our customers is more like a game rather than, and I'll give you a really mundane example. I just got an email from my utilities provider saying, will you put in your numbers and all that kind of stuff. If it was a game, A, I'd be more inclined to do it, and B, I might be able to get my son to do it, who's 26. What's the views of the panel about if you were approached, or you have an idea of approaching a larger organization, perhaps with quite deep pockets, who's looking to do something cool and funky to see if it'll work? Because you know how to create attraction for what you do. Transferring that to a large environment, does that sound interesting to you?
So that's actually one of our main client revenue streams. Like, we do things across that remit. We work with large educational organizations. We've done health and safety games. So you can do it for training internal staff. So something that is only kept internal and helps keep your staff engaged in something that otherwise they would be very bored by. Or you can do it as a way of introducing your existing customer base to a tricky element of the way that your business works. So we've worked with workwear brands and done fitting games and animations. So like there's a huge range of that kind of thing. And I think it's on the up. I think that, like you say, now automotive businesses are starting to get interested in doing that kind of thing. it's certainly a growing area and the sort of thing that I'm always happy to hear from people about.
I was just going to say, as a user, because I don't develop games and stuff, I had my car MOT'd earlier on in the year, and they sent me the report, and it was all like digital, like AI and things like that. So basically, they were showing me the wheel of my car, and then this big bubble popped out and was showing me all the numbers and stuff about my car, and that's the only time I've paid attention in my MOT. So I think it works.
Immersive experience.
Yeah, it was great.
MOT. So back in the side of the room, we've got all the waving except I've been ignoring this side. There we go.
I feel deeply insulted that I've been ignored over this side. Hi. Yeah, it's hopefully one for the entire panel, so I'll try and keep it as short and sharp as possible. But I'm basically creating a gaming social network at the moment that hopefully connects all the different streams down from connecting with your audience right through to selling them things afterwards. Sounds horrible, but it's a lot nicer than it really is. But the whole reason for that was trying to solve a problem. And not to be too negative, but I'd like everyone just to kind of say what you think the biggest problem in your area of the gaming kind of world is and what you think the solution would be around it.
I feel like people don't talk too much about, like, you know, how much you can make from gaming. I think like everyone's we're all on our own islands. I feel like if we spoke more about how much we make, how much revenue we make and stuff like that, I feel like we can make a lot more. Because like some of the times I'm in spaces and they're saying, oh, I've done this amount for, let's say like a stream. And I'm like, really? And then I know how much I made from a stream. So then when we've had this conversation, they feel so much better and they've gone on to do better things. But this is a very common thing in gaming, whereas I feel like in different fields, it's not. So yeah, I feel like that's a big problem in gaming, in my opinion, or content creation.
Can I just build on that? Because we've got a similar problem in comics as well, and there's a group of us that just got together to try and talk about building an infrastructure organisation that supports people working in comics. And I know that games they've got some sort of union elements, but in terms of sort of specifically talking about streamers and Switch, I feel like it's such a massive industry, and yet there isn't that infrastructure there. Yep. And actually sort of a similar thing could exist that helps in terms of the business side of it, and perhaps it could be part of the social, I'm not quite sure what you're building, but you know, you have sort of things to do with business, things to do with sharing of information around the finance, things to do with sort of IP and protection, and sort of creating this sort of infrastructure that is not just good for some businesses, but also takes EDI into it as well. Because I feel like there's certain sets of people in society that have access to this information and the way to do things. And so again, sort of mentoring could be built into some sort of infrastructure organisation as well. So, and just to say, all the projects we do, we always build mentoring into it. So we've done things with young people in South Africa, in India, in the UK. We're currently running projects with young people in Kenya who get involved in co-design with the work we do as well. And I think actually anybody who's doing entrepreneurial work, you should be thinking about supporting the next generation and people less fortunate than you and people who don't have access to stuff. And I would, even if you're starting out, I would look at who can you be bringing along with you. I think that should be, we should be thinking of that as part of our business model as well. I don't think that answered your question, but you know.
It's a really hard question. It is a hard question.
How would you solve the biggest problems that you've got? Well,
I think we touched on it a little bit with the fact that social media is like balkanized. Like that. My biggest problem is I have an audience. I have an audience that was growing. And all of a sudden, the way that I reach them has been completely kind of rug pulled into many different directions. And I'm trying to work out how I take back control of my audiences rather than relying on those platforms. And I'm sure for content creators, that's even more the case. You know, YouTube is one of the larger kind of sections of where your revenue comes from, and you just don't know how they're going to change their policy at any given time. You know, we have the same thing with Steam, you know. So I think the biggest problem is how do you make small and independent creators more independently connected to their audiences?
I do feel like there is just to piggyback off what you said, I feel like there is things that can work. So like you got like stuff like Discord where you can have your own community and you could talk to everyone. But I feel like just going off what's going on now with like, you know, YouTube is constantly changing, Twitch is always constantly changing, Twitter or X, wherever it is, yeah, that's constantly changing. I feel like you need to, me personally, I think having a website and just kind of like, people know where to find, you can always constantly update that, and that's not gonna change, that's your business. I think having a website and, I don't know, like having somewhere to kind of like have like a mailing list as well, I think those two things are super key right now. Something that I'm trying to work on currently is getting those two things sorted, because yeah, you just don't know, maybe like they might remove the fact that, you know, you can send out your videos to your subscribers on YouTube, and then what happens now, like, you know what I mean? You're kind of screwed. So yeah, I think you get your website sorted, get your mailing list sorted, so all the people that you want to talk to, and yeah, you should be all right, man.
Great. We are, I'm afraid, out of time now. But a few things before we end. So obviously these guys are going to be hopefully sticking around a little bit afterwards. We have a chance in a minute to have some networking and hopefully have some drinks and a few canapes. Everybody on their seats should have received a feedback form, and it's really, really hugely helpful for you guys to have filled that in. But also, it's good for you because by entering, filling in that, you'll also be entered into a prize draw to win a prize. So there is an added bonus or incentive for filling in your feedback forms. So firstly, thank you so much to our panel for coming along and being so generous with their experience and their thoughts and ideas. So could everybody join me in giving a really warm welcome, warm round of applause to thank them.